Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all doing well. And today, my friends, we're going to be talking about Cathay and Immortal Empires. So we've really seen the meta develop in Total War Warhammer 3 over the course of the past couple months. We, of course, had the tyranny of the Ogre Kingdoms in the beginning with the super overpowered Gorgers and Iron Blasters and all that sort of good stuff. But there have been a couple good balancing patches, which have fixed the Ogres, kind of brought Kislev in and reined in their chariots. And now I think we have a very clear-cut picture of what the meta is as it pertains to the end of the kind of old cycle of Total War Warhammer 3, which will be changing massively when we get Immortal Empires, right? Khorne is hands down the best faction. They're super dominant. I think that Nurgle's going to be coming in, very close behind them. And these kind of infantry-focused factions, and I would even put Slaanesh into that category because of their ability to spam Marauders and Spawn and Monstrous Infantry. And that's something that a lot of people don't know and something that I actually learned relatively recently. It didn't really occur to me, but Monstrous Infantry, with I've done a little bit of testing as well, have the same capture weight as infantry, which is pretty crazy. So if you're looking at like the old world and things like that, units like Treekin and all that stuff is going to be actually pretty darn good because they'll be durable, and Ushabti and Kroxigors, whatever, right? They should probably, assuming they're similar to Warhammer 3 units, have all of the capture capabilities. But anyways, I digress. The point I'm making is Cathay is the worst faction of the game. They are absolutely terrible in Total War Warhammer 3. It's a running joke. Typically when people pick them, they lose unless it's a Cathay mirror match. And I wanted to kind of delve into, is this more like Cathay in general is just bad and have broken mechanics like formation attack and their units are ineffective? Or is it just who they're facing? Is it the demon factions? Is it the Furies? Is it the cultist summons? Which I am kind of the opinion that it's more so like that. So what we're going to do today is just take a little bit of a dive into the old world factions and essentially look at how I think they'll do against these old world factions in the new multiplayer and domination mode. And we could even kind of touch upon land battle a little bit, but again, domination is going to be more of the focus. So firstly, let's break it down. How will they do against Wood Elves? Now, if we look at the Empire, for example, the Empire has historically done very well against Wood Elves in land battles. We haven't really seen this in domination mode, but I think it won't be too much out of the realm of possibility. So here's the thing. If you come in with Cathay, you have a couple Jade Warriors, you have a bunch of crossbows, which kind of function in a very similar manner to, and the Jade Warrior crossbows have good armor too, so they can, take missiles from Deepwood Scouts and all that sort of stuff, and are relatively cheap. So I do think that with Crane Gunners, crossbows, Jade Lancers, and Peasant Horsemen, I think that Cathay will be able to functionally trade okay against Wood Elves. So I wouldn't say that's going to be a terrible matchup for them. I still think Wood Elves, just being a stronger and more dynamic faction overall, will be better with their mobility, their hard hitting. And Wood Elves have better infantry, right? They have the Treekin, who, like I said, will probably have the same capture weight as a basic infantry. They have War Dancers, Eternal Guard, Dryad. Their infantry are just better, but I do think that like a good Cathay player might be able to function against Wood Elves. But that's really going to depend on the map. If we're looking at maps like, let's say, Galleon's Cove, whatever, these brawler maps, I think that Wood Elves will probably win like every time just because they're a little bit less static. But I think on maps like Itza, I think Cathay could come in with, let's say, like a cannon. They could come in with like maybe just like 2 or 3 crossbows, some Jade Warriors, get some basic cav units. And I also think that the Crane Gunners will be pretty good. So I don't think Wood Elves will be a terrible matchup for them. Now, looking at Vampire Coast, I feel this matchup will be pretty even, actually, because, Cathay is in many ways, and might even be Cathay favored now that I really think about it, because Cathay is very functionally similar to the Dwarves, right? You have Crane Gunners, you have Armored Infantry, you have good crossbows, and that in Warhammer 2 basically just wrecked the Vampire Coast. They would have a terrible time, but Domination's a very different beast. I think that you'll probably be seeing Coast players in this matchup spam Sirens, just try and overwhelm them with magic, since Cathay has magic damage on the Dune Dragons. But they also do have the Lore of Yang, which can do really good effective fire damage with the breath attack and also can imbue magic damage. So I think Cathay will be fine, if not actually favored against Vampire Coast. So there's a good matchup. For all of you Cathay fans out there, there's a little bit of a hope on the sunset. If your opponent picks Coast, I think you'll have a decent chance. Now, looking on to the Greenskins, I think that Cathay is going to get crumped super hard. I think that Blackworks are just going to tear apart their front line. The swarming elements of Forest Goblin Spider Riders and Stone Trolls with their missile resist, I feel like Cathay is going to get absolutely smashed by Greenskins. But I do feel like Greenskins might get outvalued in some regards, but they're just going to win on the objectives by basically shoving Cathay into the locker the entire game. So not much to say there. I just think that really cost-effective infantry factions that can kind of swarm are going to be very, very tough for Grand Cathay. So we have the Greenskins there. Now for Dwarves, this is actually really interesting. Dwarves have better infantry, better artillery, but Cathay has one thing that Dwarves really, really hate. It's like one of those like terrible articles on like, Facebook. It's like doctors hate this, you know, and it's like some miracle cure or something like that. But that it's the Crane Gunners. Crane Gunners are going to be so incredibly tyrannical against dwarves, and I do think that basic Cathay infantry, like Jade Warriors, will trade reasonably well against their equivalents, like Dwarf Warriors and whatnot, because Jade Warriors do have better combat stats than Dwarf Warriors, and I think their melee attack's a little bit higher, and yeah, I think they have slightly more armor too. So I do actually think this will probably be like a 55-45 matchup. But again, dwarves do have like really good lore choices with like Thorek and like Thorgrim and all that, and their shooting is pretty good. But Cathay has, I mean, like just rolling in with like double Crane Gunner, I think is going to be super strong. So honestly, I think that this matchup will be okay for Cathay if we're just going to kind of break it down. So Cathay, so far, if we're like looking at the old world factions, you're pretty good against Vampire Coast and dwarves. I think those are good matchups because Skaven just wrecked dwarves with Giselle. So what's not to think that? But, you know, another thing is Death Runners, too. And, like, Cathay doesn't really have anything quite like that. But, yeah, and you don't really have to worry about the Dwarf Air Force. Iron Hail Gunners might actually be relatively decent, too, for their price point. Yeah, I think that's, like, a decent matchup for Cathay. Now, looking on to Bretonnia. Bretonnia is going to be a little bit curious. Cathay might actually be good here, to be completely fair. Like, because Bretonnia doesn't have good killing power in the infantry department. Foot Squires, of course, will be probably pretty prevalent in this matchup. I would imagine we'll be seeing, like, 3 or 4, like, nonstop. Bretonnia does have questing knights, but Cathay has pretty cost-effective halberds. They have the Jade Warrior halberds and the Celestial Dragon Guard, and honestly, I can see Cathay rolling up on the middle with like 4 Celestial Dragon Guard, just like a really durable box that Bretonnia is going to struggle to break. The one thing that's going to be an issue is Enchantress and like digging her out with her Mortis engine, but honestly, I feel like Cathay might actually be favored against Bretonnia. Like looking just here at the Bretonnian roster in the old Warhammer 2, yeah, I feel like this might be a decent one. I think Cathay, like, just like elite halberd boxes. Bretonnia can, of course, play the side objectives, but, you know, Cathay does have some decent staying power for sure. Cannons, of course, have always been pretty good against Bretonnia, so you can just have one sitting back there guarded by, like, a halberd, really pounding the knights and other high-value characters. I think for Cathay, the bigger issue is going to be trying to bully the Enchantress out. And maybe to get rid of Enchantress, you go with one of the Dragon Twins. You go with, like, I don't know, Miao Ying or something, and I think Miao would be really good, actually, because she can heal your elite halberd box with Earthblood, and then she can cast Talons of the Night on the Bretonnian infantry blobs as well as some of the calves. So, yeah, I feel like this is actually maybe a Cathay-favored matchup. Now, looking on to Warriors of Chaos, we can't really speculate too much. We don't know what they're going to be getting, if there's going to be changes or updates, so that's kind of something that we'll just touch upon as we get a little bit closer. Now, Skaven. I think Skaven will absolutely crush Cathay. I think that the Mortars and the Giselles, like, because Natty Bubos will creep up, they'll get the first shots off. The Mortars are just going to absolutely ravage the Cathay infantry, and Cathay isn't going to be able to hold a side point to save their life against Skaven. Skaven are just going to roll on you so dirty using the Death Runners, creeping up on the side objectives. They're going to tar pitch you better. They're going to send like 4 Skaven slaves and Rat Ogres, which of course will probably have a good capture weight to just bully you off objectives. I think Skaven are going to absolutely destroy Cathay, and yeah. Now, on to Norska. Norska is certainly an old potato, but they keep moving, and I do think Norska will probably trade well into Cathay, because you can bring Wulfric, you can get his pirate ship. Pendulum still isn't terrible against Cathay, even in its nerf state. I think you do that. I think you just spam a bunch of cost-effective infantry and just play it like you would Khorne. Just spam Marauder Champions and Berserkers and just force Cathay back into the locker. And, of course, there's things like Famir, too. Famir have crazy good missile resist with From the Mist, really good armor. So overall, I think that Norska is going to be very heavily favored versus Cathay, and we'll probably just dunk on them. Now, Dark Elves. Dark Elves, interesting. This is kind of an interesting one here. I think Dark Elves will be favored against Cathay, too. I think that, they have good infantry choices with Blackguard, Harganeth, cheap chaff infantry like Bleak Swords, which will, of course, lose to Jade Warriors, but they can swarm, and they're a little bit, I don't know if I'd say more cost-effective. Jade Warriors actually aren't bad, but we have Dark Shards, we have Shades who can really pound down Cathay infantry. So if Cathay tries to go elite, for example, with, let's say, a bunch of Celestial Dragon Guard, I think they just get like Shades and Magic, and Repeater Crossbows just tear them apart. And if Cathay goes more defensive with like Crane Gunners, I mean, there's a ton of Dark Riders, we have Harpies, we have Mancecores. I think it's going to be hard to protect, and overall, I think Dark Elves, now that I've really kind of rationalized it in my head, will be very, very favored against Cathay. It'll be like a 60-40 type matchup. Now, another disappointment for Cathay, I think that Beastmen will absolutely annihilate Cathay as well. I think that the Bestigor herds, in conjunction with the cheap, cost-effective chariots and the Tuskgors, Razor Gores, Harpies, it is going to be hell on earth for Grand Cathay, I think. So, yeah, I would, again, put my money on the Beastmen all day. I just feel like they have too many good tools, and they're very, very strong, too. Torox is going to be a nightmare. Dude, imagine having to deal with Torox. Like, what in Cathay is going to kill him? Cathay can't even kill a Stonehorn. Like, how are they going to deal with the Brass Bull? That's going to be very, very tough for sure. Now, Vampire Counts, good night, Sweet Prince. Farewell, Cathay, once again. Cathay is going to get dunked on by Vampire Counts, I think. Vampire Counts will hands down be the strongest faction of the game, in my opinion. Just super cost-effective, unbreakable infantry, really good roadblocks via Crypt Horrors, Hounds, Bats, Black Coaches, Mortis Engines. They can kind of do it all. Like, all of the key principal elements that make Khorne really good in domination, really good infantry, unbreakable more or less, monstrous infantry, summons. Like, Vampire Counts do all that, and they have a ton of variants too, like better cav units. So Cathay is going to get just absolutely wrecked by Vampire Counts. Now, Tomb Kings is a little bit more interesting. I still think Tomb Kings are favored against Grand Cathay in their current state. Tomb Guard spam is going to be really good ever since the nerfs to kind of wind spells, although Cathay does have that Dragon's Breath spell, which will be very, very cost effective here. So I would say this is going to be like slightly Tomb King favored. They don't have access to healing in the same way. But how on earth is Cathay going to kill like 8 Tomb Guard? Like, how are they going to do that? They're just not, right? Cathay has no infantry killing power. Crossbows, ineffective. Iron Hail Gunners, pretty ineffective, honestly, because of the silver shields. Jade Lancers are basically going to tickle the pickle. They're not going to do a whole lot. And you're going to see Nehekar Horsemen just absolutely just showing them who's boss. So, yeah, it's just not going to be great. I mean, of course, a Nehekar Horseman will lose to a Jade Lancer, but that's going to take like 45 minutes. We're going to see Ushapti spam, Tomb Scorpions, and Cathay just doesn't have the killing power to push Tomb Kings off the objectives, in my experience. Looking at Lizardmen, sorry, Cathay fans. I know this is getting a little bit redundant. You know, it's funny. When I went to record this video, I was like, oh, well, let's give some hope to the Cathay players. But now that we go through it, I'm just like kind of looking at the Warhammer 2 rosters here, and I'm like, dude, this is going to be bad for our boys in Cathay here. But yeah, Sara spam, Croxagore spam, cheap dinosaurs, Bastillodons. Cathay can barely kill a single Stonehorn. How are they going to kill like 3 feral Bastillodons running all over you? I can already envision the builds that Lizardmen are going to do, and it is going to be horrible for Cathay. Because Cathay just doesn't have like any like stopping power. Although the Halberd spam might be good, if Cathay can somehow get on the objectives first against Lizardmen, let me think about it. Okay, so we have Jade Warriors with halberds. They get up on the objective. Okay, maybe we go for like 4 Celestial Dragon Guard, which will trade effectively versus the monsters, Croxagores, and infantry. Then we get some Crane Gunners in the back, but how do you stop Pterodons from taking down Crane Gunners? You summon in Longbows, but then you're taking a cost-inefficient trade. Chameleon Stalkers are in your back line. You don't see them coming. Yeah, Lizardmen just seem like overall a stronger faction. I think Cathay players, this won't be the worst one in the world, but it's still going to be a losing matchup for the most of the time. Now, let there be hope, Cathay versus High Elves. I actually think this matchup will be fine, more or less. I think that Crane Gunners will be very good against the entire roster. A little bit map dependent, but we're talking like Battle for Itza, which is kind of the standard. Man, but High Elves just have so many more lore choices and dynamic units. It's going to be tricky, but I think that High Elves and Cathay are going to be the 2 worst factions. So let's just kind of say these guys are going to have somewhat of a 50-50. But like, how do they deal with chariots? Cathay deals with chariots with, High Elf chariots coming in, like White Lion chariots. I guess they have to use Jade Lancers to stop them, which is really inefficient. I still feel like High Elves might be able to win this, because they'll probably just spam out like 5 or 6 White Lions. They'll just bring like, I don't know who they bring as their lore choice. I guess you could just go with, you go with like 5 White Lions, like 2 Phoenixes, and a L'Ariel, and like just some Reavers and stuff. And yeah, High Elves probably still win this matchup. Sorry, Cathay. I got you guys excited thinking you would have a chance here, but in the end, I think it's still going to be a 60-40 matchup. Just nothing feels good about Cathay here. Now, Empire is one I think Cathay can actually do good. I think this will be a 50-50 matchup. Maybe even at times decent for Cathay. Jade Lancers are pretty much equal to the Empire Knights, and you also have a cheaper Horseman variant in the Peasants. Jade Infantry will probably be slightly more cost effective, because, State Troopers cost 400, 500, depending on halberds, and we're going to be seeing Jade Warriors probably holding off State Troopers very cost effectively. And if you do go for Greatswords with the Empire, you're probably going to get wrecked by Cathay shooting and Crane Gunner. So, you know what? This might even be a Cathay favored matchup. I think Empire is going to be very good, but I do think Empire struggle with dwarf-like factions, like Dwarves and Cathay, for example. So this could be a tricky one for them. And hey, there you go, Cathay. Look at that. We threw you guys a bone. You guys got a good matchup versus the Empire. Now, we have gone through all of the old world factions. In summary, we'll just kind of bullet down the list here. Wood Elves will be more or less, I still think Wood Elves will be favored, but it's doable. Coast, I actually think Cathay will be favored. I think against Greenskins, you're going to get crumped. Against Dwarves, I think you'll have a 50-50 matchup, maybe with a slight favor due to the fact that you have Crane Gunners. Bretonnia will be a decent one, but slightly Bretonian favored, but still doable. Skaven, you're going to get wrecked. Norska, probably going to get wrecked too. Dark Elves will give you the dirty. Beastmen will give you the dirty. Counts will give you the dirty. Tomb Kings probably will also. Lizardmen, yeah, good luck with that. And High Elves and Empire, maybe a little bit of hope. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know your thoughts. If you guys like disagree, maybe there's something you've seen in watching these tournaments and events like in Cathay that will be better in some of these matchups. I'd be really curious to hear what you think, but just based on my experience, I've been playing a ton of practice games on the side, just trying to get back into domination mode, because honestly, I haven't played that much in the past couple months, mainly just casting. I'm trying to relearn it all, so because I want to be able to compete and be actually decent when the Immortal Empires comes out. So yeah, let me know your thoughts, guys. So that's it. I think Cathay is going to be in danger, but yeah, he's why would you ever pick Cathay? You have all these Immortal Empires factions. You have these great, mono god factions, which are just going to be getting even better. And yeah, I don't know, man. It seems rough. So hopefully, Creative Assembly, you're listening. Cathay needs some love, and they need it bad, because they are just in a very bleak spot. And even the ones that I said they would be good in today, they might not be. Cathay could just get stuffed by Vampire Coast by Cyrene spam and Depth Guard and Morgels and stuff. It could just be terrible. I'm just trying to be optimistic. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, guys, take care of yourselves. Appreciate you all. And we'll see you on the other side. Cheers.